Hi, I'm Dr. Kersi Chavda. I'm a consultant psychiatrist. Now, I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the behavior modification techniques that we use in modifying children's behavior. For that to begin, we're going to start off with just talking a little bit about certain terms that we use. The most important term being positive reinforcement. Now, what does that mean? That means, supposing somebody is doing something nice, we would kind of pat him on the back, say good boy, that kind of thing. It's like a reward. The other thing that we have going is something called negative reinforcement or punishment, where supposing you walk into a room and the person is shouting, you glare at that person. So the person kind of removes himself from whatever negative stuff he's doing, and automatically the positive comes in instead, or the negative behavior stops, and that is what we call a negative reinforcement. Now, research has proved that positives work much more than negatives. So our entire focus when we are dealing with kids is to deal on the positive that they're doing rather than the negative or the wrong that they're doing. So what we're going to be looking at is how actually do we modify kids' behaviors. To begin with, let's say if a person is looking at a particular action, we are looking at not actions but we are looking at behavior. So we're not looking at a kid doing one negative thing once in a while. We are looking at the way he does it over a period of time. We are also looking at the fact that kids are not born knowing negative actions. They do this negative action just because of the response that they are given when the negative action occurs. So, if we are looking at the whole gamut of what is innate and what is not innate, when a kid is born, he is not knowing what to do, how to react. But he has what we call reflexes. So if you put a newly born kid to his mother's breast, he'll be able to suckle without any problem. And that's called the suckle reflex. If you hold a kid in the palm of your hand and you suddenly let him down, you'll find that his hands go out, his legs go out, his toes extend, his fingers extend. That's called the startle reflex. So just like that, there are a whole bunch of reflexes that are there. And they don't have to be taught. In fact, if they're not existent, then you start wondering whether there's something wrong neurologically with the child, and you'll actually send the kid for a neurological evaluation. But when we're looking at behaviors, we're looking at consistent patterns in which he behaves in a particular way, which may be maladaptive, which may be immature, which may be difficult for him to deal with, which may be aggressive towards others, which may be just oppositional. And all of this occurs basically because he has got his reactions in a particular way. So when we talk of behavior modification, we are talking of positively reinforcing the guy rather than negatively reinforcing him, because over time research has shown that positives work much more effectively than do negatives. There are certain other principles that we follow. What we look at is consistency. So when we are looking at consistency, we are looking at the way you react should be the same more or less every time that particular behavior occurs. So for example, if you take a child to a sweet shop and you don't want to give him sweets, the first time he goes there, he has a tantrum, you're embarrassed, you say, okay, take a sweet. The second time you're angry and you beat him up. The third time you're in a very expansive mood, so you say, Harry, why one sweet? Take a whole bunch of sweets. If your responses are inconsistent, the kid doesn't know what to expect and he's going to land up having problematic behaviors just because once in a while he got a positive response, and he'll continue having those behaviors with the fond hope that he will have a positive response still. So we've got to be consistent. It should be consistent whenever the behavior occurs, and as far as possible for children, it should be consistent across the spectrum of the person who's dealing with him. So mommy and daddy and the elders should kind of deal with the same negative or positive behavior in the same fashion whenever it occurs, so that the child knows what to expect. There's another principle that we follow, which is you break up what you want him to do into small steps, and you positively reinforce every small step towards the ultimate goal. So if a kid is very hyperactive, running around, can't sit, etc., and you've decided that you're going to positively reinforce him when he does sit, which is the right thing to do, maybe you'll never be able to reinforce him because he really won't sit. So what you do is you break it up into smaller parts. So maybe when he comes close to the chair, you'll reinforce him. Then when he comes and he sits for a minute on the chair, you'll reinforce him, and so on. You're breaking it up into smaller parts. You're consistently reinforcing every smaller part. And that's called shaping of behaviors to the ultimate goal that you want him to reach. There's another principle which talks about compensation with over-restitution. And what does that mean? Now, all of us occasionally have had episodes where the kid comes home and you find that he's carrying a pen or a pencil which doesn't belong to him. And you get angry and you say, you must give this back to the child. This is called stealing. What we talk about in behavior modification is not only do you tell him to give it back, but he has to give back something of his own. So he kind of compensates, he over-restitutes, he gives back more. For example, if you're in a classroom and you go in and you find that he's torn up pieces of paper and it's all over where he's sitting, not only is he supposed to clean up that particular area, but he's supposed to clean up the whole room. And that is what we also find being very, very effective. We look at other issues as well. There's something like putting the behavior on your cue. Cue as in CUE. What does that mean? Supposing the child is restless and he's jumping around. He's going to jump around anyway whether you tell him to get up or not. But what you will do is, at regular intervals, you will ask him to get up. Maybe you tell him to come take something from you and give it to somebody else. If you're in a classroom or if you're working with him at home, you'll tell him to go and get something from the bedroom or something of the sort. So he would have got up anyway. But what happens is, you make him get up, so it's as if his behavior is under your control. And then we slowly expand the time of the behavior, the time of the length of the period in which he's sitting without being asked to do something. And very often that also enables for the behavior to come under some element of control. Another thing that we look at is that whatever be your response should be as close to the original behavior as possible, so that the kid knows what he's being either punished or rewarded for. So for example, if he's doing something now which you like, reinforce him immediately. If he's doing something now which you don't like, negatively reinforce him immediately. Don't wait for half an hour and then negatively reinforce him, because then he won't know what the association is all about. And very often kids land up just doing things for the sake of doing things. They don't really know what the association is all about. So when we are looking at a situation where a kid is doing something that you don't want him to do, it is imperative that in addition to everything else, you also attempt to be as consistent as possible, as positively reinforcing as possible, because now we all know that physical punishment is a crime and should certainly be avoided to the utmost. We are also looking at situations where you should break up whatever behavior you want him to have in small little parts, and each small part should be reinforced. We try to be as consistent as possible, and we try to be as optimistic as possible, realizing that every child will have his or her own methods of dealing with whatever be the problem. Every child will have his or her rate of progress. We cannot allow ourselves to be very impatient. We cannot allow ourselves to be jumping around and getting angry and screaming, because that is not something that is really going to help. And what it will have the effect of doing is that in addition to the negative behavior, the child will also get scared. And fear always aggravates whatever be the original negative behavior. So it is imperative for us to be as positive as we possibly can be. Now very often parents and teachers ask me, how positive should we get? The child is going to go out into the bad world. Isn't there a limit to the positiveness that we should give him? And I always say no. There is no limit to being positive. We have to continue being as positive as we possibly can be, with the fond hope that if the child learns a positivity, if his basic kernel of attitude, confidence, etc. within him is as positive as it can be, then his emotional quotient will be higher, and he'll be in a position to deal with the problems that he faces when he actually goes out into the world where people are not going to be so nice with him. That does mean that we shouldn't reinforce him for stupid things, but that does mean also that we should reinforce him as much as possible without thinking that we are making him weak. We are not making him weak. Behavior modification, where you are as positive as possible, is actually something that is extremely effective and which works very well. Often also I have been asked about physical punishment. Physical punishment plays no role in behavior modification techniques. Today it's a crime for children. If you hit or you beat or you punish corporally a kid, you can be imprisoned because it's a crime. In any case, it does nothing for the child. The child learns fear, the child learns how to avoid doing something that will make him get caught, which is not again what you are looking at. It does no good at all. So what we are looking at is to attempt to be as positive as possible and not to allow for the negativity which often we see, which comes in even with adults and with children, to be manifest to the utmost. We must remember that kids' behaviors can be changed and modified, that the negativity can be changed and positive behaviors can be put instead in their stead. The idea is to believe that children want to be good. If we start off with the basic premise that kids are horrible little creatures and they do things just to irritate us, then that is something that we need to deal with and our attitudes have to change. We also have to be aware of the fact that there are limitations to behavior modification, but done in conjunction and under the supervision of a therapist and a doctor together, a psychiatrist together, there's an enormous amount of change that can occur in a kid's negative behaviors, which will only enable him to become more positive in the future and allow for positive reinforcement to come in from the environment, which can only have a beneficial effect on him in the long run. Thank you.